Welcome to Roy's Book Reviews. In this week's installment, I am going to discuss three novels. Each of them falls into the genre of horror/thriller. I like to jump around with the types of books that I read. I read a lot of literary fiction, but I also hop around in various categories of popular fiction and just choose something where the subject matter grabs my attention. And for one reason or another, stories about serial killers tend to grab me. Not only nonfiction, real life stories about famous serial killers throughout history who have caused all manner of mayhem, but also fictional characters authors have created, largely inspired by these people in our society who seem to not have a conscience and are driven by these strange compulsions to take lives, not out of anger or hurt or jealousy or rage of any kind, but just because they need to take the life of a certain type of person in order to, I guess, feel easier in their own skin. And I'm also drawn to the investigators who try to figure out, what is compelling these people to kill at the specific times that they choose, and hoping that they can get one step ahead of them if they can psychoanalyze them prior to actually meeting them based on the clues that they leave behind. So that is what drew me to read The Axeman by Ray Celestin. It was a thoroughly entertaining read, populated with interesting characters and intriguing situations right out of history books. I like to read historical fiction. That's another genre that draws me. And the combination of historical fiction that happens to be about a serial killer is a potent mix. I've read a few books that fall into this category. When you go far enough back where it's pre and cell phone and other modes of modern communication, these books have an extra level of suspense, and character can be trapped in a situation back then that's seemingly impossible to get out of. You change the setting of that same story to 2019, and all of a sudden that same person would be able to get out of it simply by making a quick call on their cell phone. So, on with my review here. The Axeman is set in a period before the onset of Prohibition, and the setting is New Orleans. New Orleans is, in my opinion, one of the coolest places in America, on this planet. So this book really just had a lot of elements that are of interest to me. The pre-Prohibition's time, the serial killer storyline, and the fact that takes place in New Orleans. And therefore it features jazz musicians and voodoo. It's also the mafia, or early incarnation of the mafia. There's plenty of vice, plenty of racial tensions. There's an interracial love story, which takes place in defiance of the times. There are crooked politicians, determined police officers, intrepid private investigators, and of course, as you have figured out from the serial killer, from the title, there is a serial killer whose weapon of choice is an axe, and he's running amok. One other element of this story is a hurricane, which is basically a predecessor to Katrina in the amount of damage that it caused in New Orleans. I believe that's based on a real life hurricane that took place back then, is also part of the narrative of this story. So overall, I would say that this book delivered on the promise made in the cover copy to be very absorbing, quite the page turner. I do recommend it, particularly for those of you who are interested in a little murder mystery in your reading habits. It wasn't especially gory, but it is about someone who's killing people with axes. So if that's not everybody's cup of tea, I understand that. The second book I am going to discuss is NOS4A2 by Joe Hill. Joe Hill happens to be one of the sons of one of America's most celebrated authors, Stephen King. Joe Hill followed his father into not only into the writing business, but into the horror writing business, which I'm sure he found to be a bit intimidating. He wanted to get by on his own name, so he changed it to Joe Hill rather than sticking with King in order to stand out on his own. And I would say he definitely succeeds based on this book, NOS4A2. It delivered, and it proved the old adage that the apple does not fall far from the tree. Taking the merriest of holidays and turning ho-ho-hos into a tale of horror, in my opinion, was a stroke of genius. If you hear jingle bells sung or performed in late November or early or in December, it'll bring smiles to the faces of those who celebrate Christmas on December 25th. Hear it in June and it's straight out creepy because it so obviously does not belong. I wouldn't be surprised if it was this particular event that planted the seed in Joe Hill's mind for this book. But whether that's the case or not, Joe Hill's novel is a well-executed tale, inhabited by characters who are easy to relate to. It features a protagonist who's able to conjure up a bridge with her mind that can take her wherever she wishes to go. We all wish at some point that we had a superpower, whether it be invisibility or X-ray vision or superhuman strength or the ability to take flight. In NOS4A2, we meet a woman who can find whatever is missing, wherever it may be. But taking too many trips in search of lost things comes at the risk of losing her mind, or having everyone believe that's what's happening to her. This spooky, inventive story does have me anxious to read more of Joe Hill's work. And also, it makes me not want to procrastinate, as I usually do each year, when it comes to taking down my Christmas decorations once the holiday season is over. Somehow, Joe Hill makes the whole concept of Christmas rather creepy with this book. I mean, anybody can make Halloween scary, but I would say Joe Hill can freak readers out 365 days a year if this book is any indication. He has another son, Stephen King does, who's a writer who chose, at least with his first book that I read, and I will probably review here at some point. It's not a horror story. He also is a fine writer. I believe Stephen King's wife is also an author, so definitely a lot of quality writing taking place in that household. The final book I am going to discuss in brief is The Ruins by Scott B. Smith. This book is seriously creepy stuff. Poses the question, what do you do if you and a group of friends end up on a hill in Mexico that is crawling with vines from hell? These vines can think, plot, see, hear, deceive, mock, physically and mentally torture, invade your body, and destroy your soul before eventually, inevitably, stripping your bones clean. I suppose there isn't much to do but hold out for as long as you can in hopes that the cavalry will arrive before it's too late. And if one of you happens to be an Eagle Scout, which is the case in this book, perhaps you can figure out ways to last somewhat longer than the average people. But no matter, because ultimately it was too late the moment you took one step upon that hill. This is truly a dreams haunting kind of book. I believe The Ruins was made into a movie, and I'm not sure how good the movie is, but the book is definitely excellent. NOS4A2 by Joe Hill, I believe, has been made into either a movie or a miniseries on one of the cable networks. I have not heard about any adaptation of the Axeman, but I think it also would make an excellent on-screen story. But forget about the screen. Pick up these books, give them a read if you are into chilling tales. Each of these books delivers in that regard. I enjoyed them. I think you will as well. And that concludes this week's episode of Roy's Book Reviews. As always, happy reading. If you've read any of these books, feel free to leave a comment and let me know what you thought about them. I like to see your thoughts as well as share my own. So until next week, signing off.